Chris Bale, the Douglas and Ellen Lowy Associate Professor of Sociology and Public Policy, the recipient of both a Guggenheim and a Carnegie Fellowship. Chris is a renowned scholar of political polarization and computational social science, and his research is helping to redefine the way that we think about political discourse in the age of social media. But I will let him explain this to you. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Chris Bale.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. So I'd like to begin tonight by asking for a show of hands. How many people have come across a social media post about politics that has made you upset? Most of us, right? Social media sometimes kind of feels like the world's worst Thanksgiving dinner, right? Except instead of having one angry uncle who wants to tell you about politics, you've got like 100, right? And there's emoji. So what we've been doing lately in the Duke Polarization Lab, so maybe you've heard of this term, the social media echo chamber, right? We tend to friend and follow people who share our political orientations. And of course, Facebook, Twitter, other social media sites, they know this, and they've adopted their algorithms so that we are repeatedly exposed even more to people who share our views. So why is this a problem? Well, it's pretty obvious at this point, right? Republicans and Democrats continue to segregate themselves in online communities, and there's very few opportunities for genuine kind of bipartisan dialogue, right? We don't have the opportunity to humanize each other, empathize with each other, and in this kind of environment, stereotypes thrive, right? So last year, I founded the Duke Polarization Lab to develop new technology to bridge America's partisan divides. We are a team of social scientists, computer scientists, statisticians, engineers, undergraduates, graduate students, who are trying to build new technology to bridge Americans' polarization problem. So the first thing we wanted to know is it the case that social media echo chambers are driving political polarization? If we could take people out of their echo chamber temporarily and expose them to the other side, what would happen? And so about a year and a half ago, we ran a pretty novel experiment. We recruited 1,600 Democrats and Republicans, and they all completed a long survey about their political views, what they thought about each other and what they thought about social policies and so on and so forth. And 1 week later, we got the very best Russian bot maker. No, I'm kidding. We made our own bots. We made our own bots that expose them to messages from the opposing political party. I'll tell you a little bit more about how we built those in just a minute. And we monitored whether they were paying attention by asking them questions about the content of the bot's tweets. And then at the end of the month, one truly excruciating month, we resurveyed people and asked them about their views again. And we wanted to know again, was exposure to the other side driving polarization? So before I tell you what we found, let me tell you a little bit more about these bots. So what we did is we took every elected official. These are congresspeople, senators, presidential candidates. We got the names of everyone that they follow. So this would include not only people like Lisa Murkowski or Hillary Clinton, but also Fox News and the Heritage Foundation or CNN. Our goal was to try to get the full continuum of the other side. So Republicans are following Democrats, who may be journalists, elected officials, advocacy leaders. Democrats are following Republicans, same type of Republicans. Duke alumni are following Carolina alumni. No, that treatment condition got voted down. And each day, every hour, the bot drew a random tweet from the other side that had been tweeted, and then it tweeted out into the ether. Okay, so what did we find? The answer might surprise you. So remember, we're looking at how people change their views after following a bot that exposed them to messages from the other political side for 1 month. We didn't find that anyone became more moderate. Conversely, Democrats became slightly more liberal. It was a small effect, but it was sizable. Republicans became substantially more conservative, on the order of the overall increase in polarization over the last 10 years, just through 1 month of exposure. Bad news, right? What explains this deeply depressing result? Well, when you think about it, right, if I expose you to a barrage of messages, 24 messages a day, they're not congenial to your political perspective, right? What happens? Creates a profound cognitive dissonance. Your sense of identity, your sense of how the world works, maybe even your entire worldview is challenged by these tweets, right? So what do? Well, social psychology teaches us that we're motivated reasoners, right? We look around the world for evidence that makes us feel better about ourselves, reconfirms our worldview, and we do this in a highly selective and motivated manner. We start looking for all the other pieces of evidence that might contradict the messages we're being exposed to. And what happens? Well, after 1 month, we may be left with more reasons to disagree with the messages that we've been exposed to than we might have had we not been exposed at all. This is something that's been popularly referred to as the backfire effect. So what does this mean? What can we do about this? Well, I'll tell you what Twitter wants to do about it. Twitter, about a year ago, announced plans, noble and well-intentioned plans, to expose its users to tweets from the other side, to turn that dial, to tweak the algorithm just a little bit so that Republicans saw a few more Democrats and Democrats saw a few more Republicans. But if our study is right, this is a really bad idea, right? Exposing people to the other side may only harden intergroup stereotypes and create the kind of same backfire effect that we found. So I know what many of you are thinking at this point. Social media is bad for democracy. Right? Twitter is bad for democracy. Right? And that's important, right? Because years ago, we were celebrating Twitter as the saving grace as democracy, right? Anybody can participate in a conversation. Virtually anybody can debate anybody else, right? So this is really depressing news. And you may well be thinking, I'm finally got another reason to delete my Facebook account or delete my Twitter account, right? And what we really need is to get offline interaction and really be able to get in the same room and empathize with each other. Yes, I couldn't agree more. But at the same time, if you've got young people in your life, you know that young people, and maybe America more broadly, is addicted to social media. More and more social media sites are populated by young people each day, and increasingly young people are getting their news on social media and discussing politics on social media. So the idea that we can simply turn it off is probably not tenable, right? Instead, in the Duke Polarization Lab, we want to do nothing short of building social media over again. We like to think of America as a puzzle piece, a series of pieces that can come together. But again, we're cloistered, we're in our echo chamber, right? What's preventing us from coming together? Well, the theory of motivated reasoning, the backfire effect we've documented, would suggest at least a few things need to happen. First, we need to find some way of putting our ideas before our identities. As soon as I see you as a member of the other party, whatever you say gets filtered through that lens. And I can't really understand you, I can't really humanize you, and I can't really come to terms with what you're saying. Right? Also, Americans don't just have a fully articulated list of things they care about. Not everybody cares about every issue. Some people care a lot about climate change. Other people care a lot about trade policy, right? And so what a truly intelligent and democratic social media system might do, we think, is to create an anonymous system to connect people outside of their party baggage. You care about climate change, I care about trade policy, but I don't care much about climate change and you don't care too much about trade policy, we match you. And we say, you have an opportunity to persuade someone from the other side about the issue that you care about. We create a reputation system that allows people to earn points and rewards for having a strong reputation as someone who's good at talking to the other side. And this is the work we're doing right now, literally this week in the Duke Polarization Lab. We're inventing a system of value trading. We think this is the path forward, a smart way to break up social media echo chambers that also gives people incentive to talk to each other. But we wouldn't be here without alumni like you. You all have given us not only the resources to do this research, to bring together, for the first time, computer scientists, social scientists, engineers, and undergrads. One of our best coders is a junior, to build these tools. Right? We have a unique opportunity to understand what's going on in our country, but even more importantly, as Duke's mission so clearly elucidates, we need to take this public, and we need to build tools that we can actually put in the hands of people, and that's what we're doing, trying to take a first step towards reducing America's partisan divides. Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic, and as someone who's done work in similar areas, I have a question for Chris, but we'll open the floor to questions. So as I'm asking my question, and he answers quickly, I'll ask for a show of hands, and we have microphones running the house, and we'll take about 10 minutes for questions. So how much do you think, you suggested that if people had an opportunity to develop a relationship first, that they weren't confronted by someone categorized as an opponent, that they might be able to resist some of this this blowback. How much do you think this really comes down to trust? Mm-hmm. Because so much that we know about trust in institutions has shown a very long decline now for decades. Mm-hmm. And the question is whether that lack of trust has now penetrated into the polity more generally.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a fundamental part of human nature that we form those bonds of trust through interpersonal interaction. I can see you making eye contact with me. I can understand when you use something like sarcasm, right? Social media doesn't give us any of those affordances, right? We are simply exposed to a message, and usually a particularly extreme message. And some of our research shows that the modal person is not being exposed to a moderate, right? Most of the people who are most vocal on social media are extremists. And so not only are we lacking the opportunity to build trust, but we're being exposed at a stronger and more powerful level to the very extremists who kind of confirm the stereotype that creates a breakdown in trust.
Right. Not that we'll ever bridge that gap with people from Chapel Hill. Okay, so the floor is open to questions, and we do have microphones running. We have a question over here on the end of the aisle.
Hello, I work in education, and as you noted, young people are constantly consuming lots of social media today, even more than we did when we were growing up. So if you could wish one thing that teachers were doing in classrooms today to help kids engage with social media in a more productive way, what, if anything, would you recommend?
What a great question. I think, we used to have civics classes. Maybe it's time for civics classes 2.0. There are consequences to trolling people on social media, to engaging in kind of expressive behavior, right? There are consequences to uncritically retweeting something, right? But we need new information into the minds of our young people. Like we need to reboot civics, in my view, and I'm so happy to know that alumni like you are thinking and caring deeply about this, and I think you could make a real impact.
We had a question down here in the front row. Yes.
Hi, Chris. Dave Simon. I majored in public policy and religion, so two things I can't talk about as a financial planner. And I was very interested in politics. We actually worked for the Governor's Center when I was at Duke. But my question is this. The chasm seems to be growing wider, obviously. You're obviously an optimist, doing what you do. But looking at one of your slides about how there was a dearth, it even went the opposite way, do you foresee any way that social media can help to bring us closer and get the folks in Washington to be collaborative again, as opposed to on the opposite sides?
Yeah, great. Another great question. Duke alumni are sharp. A few things. We are already working with Twitter on this issue. And one of the key things we think is boosting moderates, right? So as I was saying to Vince earlier, the extremists, for obvious reasons, get all the attention, right? They say the most extreme thing, they get retweeted, they get mentioned more than other people, right? But there's genuinely moderate people out there. And one of the things that I think people need to know is that the data show that there are a number of issues around which Americans can still come together. Even something as seemingly divisive as climate change, given the virulent argument around the Paris Climate Accord, there's a lot of consensus that we need to do something, right? We may disagree about what causes it, but there's a surprising degree of overlap about how we might go about approaching it, right? Creating various kinds of tax incentives for green energy, for example, right? So I think it means tweaking those things, right? Finding those moderate conversations and boosting them. Is that going to solve the entire problem? No. But in the current environment, we need to make a dent. We need to take a first step.
We had a question over here on the end.
Yes, hi. Can you talk a little bit about how registered independents would fit into your research either now or in the future?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we couldn't study independents because we didn't know who to expose them to other than Carolina fans, right? Who we can just all agree are just terrible, right? So we didn't study independents. So the answer to your question is we don't know. But in one of our follow-up studies, we think there might be a curvilinear association between your ideological position and what happens when we expose you to messages from the opposing political party. So for example, if you are a hardcore liberal and we expose you to a hardcore conservative, backfire, right? It's just a bridge too far, as the previous questioner was suggesting, right? But if I take a moderate liberal and a moderate conservative, right? Maybe they can have a productive conversation, the type of conversation that creates empathy and understanding.
Yes, here in the front.
Better say mine is a great question, too.
Now I'm obligated, right?
You didn't deal with how we got to this position and whether whatever caused us to get here could be reversed and go back to the other, or is that so geographically ingrained that it's impossible?
Sure, so,
That's a great question.
It's a great question, all right, thank you. I almost forgot. It is a great question. And it's a great question because, we tend to actually exaggerate the extent that we're polarized. So, we often, many of us here, well, we're more polarized than ever. And that's true on a lot of metrics, especially how Democrats rate Republicans and vice versa. But again, if you look at policy positions, the story is a lot more nuanced. We're not quite as polarized. Our elites are polarized, our leaders are polarized. But if you look over time, right, what you see is a lot of people, now there's wedge issues, there's gun control, there's abortion. But what you really begin to see is that people are actually overestimating the extent of polarization. And interestingly, when we correct this in the lab, when we say, to a control group, what do you think of the other party, right? And then the other party gets a little prime that says, actually, did you know that the other party, thinks something that's much more moderate than you maybe realized? Those people then moderate their views. So if you think about it, it kind of gets back to the boosting moderates thing, right? If we can somehow find a way to actually let people hear each other, that seems to be the ticket. Now, the historical story, really, really nuanced, and you might need Professor Price up here to give you the rest of the story. But definitely all sorts of other factors, political parties, economic cleavages, so many other things going on, but really that's outside my area of expertise.
We have a question in the middle here.
Hi. My question's around anonymity. Some platforms, Twitter, for example, it's very easy to be anonymous. Facebook, a little bit harder. In person, even much, much harder. So I guess, in your vision of rebuilding social media, do you see anonymity as helpful or unhelpful feature?
Great question. What we need is something in between, right? Full anonymity, that leads to a breakdown in civics, right? That leads to people name calling and so on and so forth. But full identity has the other problem, right? People aren't willing to share kind of intimate details. What sites like Reddit have pioneered, so Reddit is the kind of popular discussion forum that some of you may use, is they have a pseudonym, right? And so it's like you've kind of still got an identity that you might care about on the site. You might care about that identity for that pseudonym, remaining strong, right? So it's somewhere in between, nervousness about sharing your genuine ideas, but also feeling fully free to say whatever on earth you want. So we think that that's the right way forward.
Time for one final question. I haven't quite covered anybody on this side of the room. Otherwise, we'll go here to the front. In the front row? Sure.
Hey, so as you are looking at polarization in the wider society, I was curious to hear how you think about polarization on your own team and whether, what the partisan makeup of your team is and whether, as they've been involved in this project, that has changed over time or they've become more or less polarized.
Yeah, we do have conservative members of the lab.
Also not a good question.
Yeah, no, that's not a good question, right? But this is a big problem. Like one thing that studies of social psychology show us is that liberals tend to value embracing diversity. Right? That's kind of a core liberal value. And so a lot of what you see in attempts to depolarize are kind of preaching to the choir, right? Like the very people who want to kind of reach out and understand, now they might not want to change their views, but they at least want to, listen to the other side, right? They're the type of people who we're preaching to, right? And so we think that, anonymity, this kind of, or pseudonymity that I was just talking about is kind of key to that, right? Take off the party baggage, right? And let people, because you may be surprised, or at least we've been surprised in the lab to see how conservative Democrats can be and how liberal Republicans can be. And I think we just have this baggage on that prevents us from getting there.
Well, I would like to ask you to join me in thanking Chris for a
Thank you.
wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.